your business partners explained this to me. He said to me once, I've built this business for 10 years and I don't really care if we're going to have problems or go under because of market fluctuation or, war or whatever could happen that I can't influence. But what I just couldn't really deal with, if some dumb old crook from somewhere overseas managed to infiltrate my company and within a few minutes basically ruins part of my life's work just because they can.
Hey, this is Mark at Magnetic Alliance here at Channel, inspiring entrepreneurs to create unlimited growth in business and in life. And today we have the CEO of Jam Cyber, a cybersecurity firm, Markus Hugensmit. And the reason why we have Markus is there's a lot of things you need to do to create growth in your business. But in order to keep the growth, you need to protect it. So why is cybersecurity super important? Well, we in Magnetic Alliance have been growing our business for the last 10 years, and I don't want to risk all that hard work, the blood, the sweat, the tears, because one of our staff members clicks the wrong link. So welcome to the interview, Markus. It's good to have you. I probably am going to have a whole bunch of questions for you down the track. So we might need to keep you handy every now and then, but welcome to the interview.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
So let me introduce Markus to you and why we were so keen to have Markus help us with our cybersecurity. Well, most people in cybersecurity that I have met, right, if we translate it to physical security, because cyber is a bit vague, and what Markus is going to do today, hopefully, is to unveil cybersecurity and drag all the mysteries out of it. But if I were to compare cybersecurity firms to normal security firms, it's kind of like getting an alarm system put in your home, right? You go to a security company and they'll put an alarm in. And that's good, all well and fine, but there's a whole range of other ways that people can break into your house and steal stuff. So the reason why Markus was really unique was if he was a security firm, he wouldn't just put the alarm in. He'd put your fencing in, he'd put the security dogs, he'd put the tinted glass, he'd put the locks, he'd put the cameras, he'd put tripwires in there. And he's going to train your people to watch out for burglars and suspicious people as well. It's a whole 360-degree point of view when it comes to cyber. And the really interesting part is that he can get the protection up to about 95%, whereas most other cyber protection can get up to about 45-50%. That's why it was really important for me to speak with Markus and also get him on this interview, because we want to understand cyber much more and understand what the risks are and how to protect ourselves in our business, because it's not just your business, it's also your personal data that is at risk. So Markus, what is cybersecurity? Can you tell us what it is? It's all this mystical computer stuff that people don't seem to understand. Can you tell us what is cybersecurity?
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you for starting with that question. Cybersecurity, I agree, it's a little bit hard to sort of ring fence in easy terms. And I like the example you brought earlier with the security company, the conventional security company installing a multitude of systems, and not just hardware, but also, for example, training to protect, in your example, a building. I think the most important thing to realize when it comes to cybersecurity is that it's not an IT problem. What we find is that because a lot of companies look at it as a problem in the IT department, the technical sort of aspects outweigh other approaches. Cybersecurity is very much spread across three main areas. The first one being people, because 93+% of cyber breaches that occur today happen because of employee error. So clearly, the people behind those computers, they're the actual weak point, and they're also the attack surface for cyber criminals.
It's like having all the security in your house and one of the people in the house leaves the door open for someone to just
Yeah,
walk.
that's a very, very good example. That's basically what's happening. So if you say it's an IT problem and you let your IT guys try and fix this, what happens is they put these big fat locks on the door, but your staff doesn't know to keep them locked. They don't even know how to lock them in the first place. And so really one of the biggest areas of cybersecurity is people. That's people training, that's people management, that's controlling what people can and can't do in a nutshell. The second big area is what we refer to as cyber governance. It's all the paperwork that, in particular, small and medium business don't really like that much. It's really important for business to have a disaster recovery process and an incident response plan so that if something does go wrong, systems and processes are in place and people know what to do.
Is that something that's regulated in any way, shape, or form?
It's unfortunately not yet. So, unlike in areas like OH&S, the cybersecurity governance or frameworks, they're pretty much, do what you want. And what we have done is we've created that from scratch, suitable for small and medium business, so it can be applied without having to reinvent the wheel 15 times over.
Isn't there a rule that I saw somewhere? If you're a certain over a certain turnover, if you get cyber attacked, you have to have some obligations of some sort.
That's correct. If you turn over more than $3 million, you have an obligation under the data ombudsman to report any data breaches. Failure to do so, in theory, would leave you open to litigation under the Privacy Act of up to $444,000 per individual affected. So, in theory, a massive exposure. That is one of the few legal requirements that applies to businesses, but it's an important one. And that's a classic one where, not just having an incident response plan, but actually knowing and having a template on how to report a data breach to the relevant authorities is critical, because if you're not doing it, you may be open to lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
And the third area, of course, then is a technical area. So because the computer that is being used to access your data is essentially one of the attack surfaces, we also need to put some measures in around that technology sort of space. But what's really important, and I like how you pointed that out earlier, what most IT approaches do is install an antivirus or maybe endpoint detection and response now in 2022. And then they leave it at that. But in statistically, if you look at that, that's roughly covering half of what you should be doing. And that's because antivirus does not cover anything that people tend to cause. And let's not forget that the top three cyber threats at the moment, including phishing and ransomware, can usually not be detected by antivirus software. They are classic people-induced error where a person essentially makes a mistake and either opens up your data pool potentially via the cloud, fully accessible to a third party you don't know about, and they can snoop around for as long as they want until they let a trap snap, or they can encrypt your entire data pool and demand a ransom, or they can abuse your data for ID theft or God knows what else in the criminal space.
I'm already feeling vulnerable at the moment with you just saying that. I think I'm gonna put my protection hat so I could avoid some of those vulnerabilities.
And you should be.
New hat that we got, so just want to wear it. Makes me look bald, but that's all right. Yeah. So look, this is why I hear from you that it's important, right? Number one, like I said, I don't want to lose my business that I've spent 10 years building because someone clicks the wrong link with phishing and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is the regulatory aspect, where if you're turning over a certain amount, then you are required to release the information about the breaches, and you need to be able to somehow be able to report on that as well. So that's sounds like why it is really, really critical to have the cybersecurity. Can you tell us a bit more about the threats and the impact of those threats? Like, is phishing just a little thing? Is it going to be a little bit of an inconvenience or ransomware? Or Are they like business ending type of events?
There's a multitude of different threats. And what we learned 20 years ago with viruses still to a degree persists. But the top threats in 2022 would be threats that are usually email or call induced, but are not protected from antivirus, and usually start with an employee error. The most classic example being phishing. Phishing is the practice of sending out emails that encourage a user to log on to a cloud-based service, something like Office 365 or Zero Accounting or Google Workspace. And they do that by presenting a compelling reason to log on. So, for example, your mailbox has just gone over limit. Press here to get 10 gigs of extra storage for free. It's these kind of approaches that appeal to urgency. And of course, it's a mass send out. So if you send out 1 million of those emails for free, if you hit one or two people in your organization and your organization accidentally or randomly uses that software that the phishing email is portraying to be from, then if a user clicks on that and enters those credentials or the username and password for that service, what it means is that from then onward, these credentials are captured, and a malicious body entity or criminal enterprise can then access, in the instance of 365, your emails, your calendars, your files, your to-do lists, your contacts. So they can literally look over your shoulder or one of your staff's shoulder day to day, in and out, for as long as they choose to.
So literally, they can send emails on behalf of you. They can put scams in place to your clients.
Absolutely.
They can monitor your passwords that you put in, empty your bank accounts. I mean, it all sounds pretty bad.
It is pretty bad. And one of the most successful threats at the moment is, we call it invoice redirection scams, which somebody actually gains access to an email account outside of your organization, usually a supplier contact. So it's not even that you are actually hacked, far from, but because some company you're dealing with has been hacked, they essentially manage in a roundabout way, on average, to extract about $40,000 of your hard-earned cash.
You know what?
Because you're paying to the wrong place.
That actually nearly happened to us. I got an email from our accounts person and saying, "Hey, look, I'm ready to make the payment. Like, can you please just transfer the money?" And I'm going, "What do you mean? I didn't ask for this." And she said, "Well, didn't you send me an email where you urgently wanted a bill paid?" And so someone has looked up our accounts person, someone has looked up who I am and what my role is and what their role is. They know the interaction between us, and they've actually posed as me sending an urgent payment to a supplier to my own team who nearly paid it. It is lucky that we have checks and balances in place where we have financial controls and separation of duties between people. Otherwise, if that person had all the access to everything and they just were able to release payments, then they would have paid that bill without me even knowing.
This is a very good example of where governance, or in this case, policies or processes or procedures internally, are actually the only barrier against a cyber breach occurring. No antivirus would have stopped that example. But you having a process and you having staff having specific training makes them aware of this, or they follow a process which then raises the right flags and stops the breach from being successful. So that's a very, very good example.
What are the typical impacts on businesses? Like, are they just gonna have someone snooping? Do they normally get to empty your bank accounts? Do they steal data? What's the normal impact to a business? Is there some sort of a cost or a dollar figure that we can put to it?
Yeah, so look, in Australia, as at last year, the average damage bill for a cyber breach was $267,000 and took up to 6 months to fully be rectified. That obviously depends a bit on the industry and et cetera, et cetera. That's a
huge amount. Like, for a small business, even if you're turning over, $5 million or $10 million, that amount could break a business pretty easily.
That's right. Now, it's actually getting a bit worse than that. And that's because what we're now seeing in particular with ransomware, and ransomware is a process where your data is basically made unusable by yourself. And in the olden days, the only demand was a ransom. Meanwhile, if you don't pay the ransom, the data is actually abused. And there is now the first instances where the data before encryption is actually siphoned off and is used for stuff like ID theft or invoice redirection scams and other things. So in a nutshell, you have to look at cyber criminals as they're basically just running an enterprise. So what they do, and we could see that last year and the last 2 years with COVID, right? As the pressure on the health system increased, the organized, and this truly organized crime would actually go and run specific cyber attacks against the health space, being in the know that if you shut down a hospital, of course they're going to pay your ransom because they can't even wait 3 days for the system to be restored. So fundamentally, it's a criminal enterprise. It's a global multi-billion dollar business. And wherever there is way of money to be made, it will be made. So the impact to a business generally is anywhere from, say $50,000 if you're a small business and they've done their research and demand a $50,000 ransom, all the way through to your business actually shutting down. Because if you hold sensitive information of any kind, be that health, accounting, finance, whatever it is, and that data leaks, you're very, very likely not to have a business in the very near term.
Speaking of $50,000 ransom, that happened to our photographer, and he's basically a micro business. It's just him doing all the work. We took a full day to shoot some photos, me and Jack, and when it came time to, after all the editing and all the selections and everything, he came back to us and said, "Oh, I have a problem. We have to do the shoot again," because he lost 3 weeks worth of work because of that ransom. They tried to get $50,000 ransom from him, and of course, a small business, a micro business, can't afford to pay that, and so he had to just throw all that work away and start again. But he could recover because he could just do the work, and in fact, if they released the photos, we could have just taken it off online, and that would have been better for us. But I could see your point, where if you were an accounting firm or a legal firm or any kind of company that deals with any sensitive data, you don't want your clients' P&Ls floating around the internet. That's not going to look good for a business. And in some cases, the reputational damage there is going to be so bad. The litigation that could open up because of that is going to be severe, especially if the business whose data you put online suffers damages. And it's so really, it's not just big businesses that should be concerned, like hospitals and big oil and gas companies. I mean, I've also, from our dealings in the oil and gas, TNT have got ransom attacked, and Toll. And my business partner in that space was telling me that one of them paid the ransom of $250,000 and the other one didn't, and it cost him something like $300 million in damages. So it's not only for a big business to be cyber attacked, they're also doing it to small businesses, trying to get $40,000, $50,000, couple of $100,000 out of small businesses. And I know that I get all these emails and attacks on a daily basis, at least 10 to 20 attempts per day to try and breach our security, and every single staff member is in the same spot. So you could literally say every single day we're receiving hundreds of cyber attacks.
That's correct. So, as a matter of fact, as at last year, 43% of all cyber attacks are specifically targeting small and medium business, because you don't have the cyber defenses a big corporate has. So while the return, if you will, on a successful breach on a big company like Toll or Westpac or somebody may be much bigger, it's actually much, much easier to go and try and infiltrate a small or medium business because the defenses aren't there.
Yeah,
And
that was going to be my next question was how likely am I to be cyber attacked? And you're saying half of all cyber attacks were to small businesses.
That's right.
Wow.
And it's gotten worse with the emergence of social media. So, meanwhile, every small business has some sort of representation on social media and LinkedIn pages where you can see staff roles. There's all this information available. And what's emerged now as well in the last few years is we call it social engineered attacks. So, rather than just attack by sending 5 million emails to your random email accounts, and that's what you described earlier. People go on your website, they go on LinkedIn, they find out the roles, and more and more we have actually voice calls where perfectly Australian sounding voices call in and present the perfect use case and then manage in that use case for you to expect an email to be sent from a Gmail account or something, some free email account with an attachment. And once you execute it, bam, Bob's your uncle, and the ransomware has been executed. So what we saw from that email 10 or 15 years ago in bad English, plain text about some king from Congo or somewhere in Africa trying to give away $50 million, yeah, full of spelling errors. We are now at a phase or at a point where these attacks get extremely sophisticated. It looks the part. The dodgy websites have the little padlocks on the top left where we thought, oh, that makes it look
Yeah.
right. It's all looking the part. And if the trap snaps, it snaps 3 times as hard. In the meantime, that's what I'm saying as well, is your data is not just captured and held ransom, it's usually actually abused. We have the first instances now where schools are targeted. And if the data is retrieved, they're actually approaching the parents of the pupils to apply pressure for the ransom to be paid. So it just becomes literally every year becomes more sophisticated,
Yeah.
more intense, and
It's
bigger business.
becoming smarter. I mean, those, 10, 15 years ago when you're getting the hugely long email from somewhere in, Nigeria, it sounds unbelievable that somehow I've got $200 million inheritance from someone I didn't know in a different country. But now you're getting phone calls from normal local people that you're used to, and it sounds like it's coming from your energy company, your phone company,
Yeah.
and like companies that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, not some random thing where, whoa, what's happening, like, it sounds so unfamiliar that your red flags go up. But now, it's so normal looking based on them getting to know your local situation that you can't even tell it apart almost from, even your normal day-to-day suppliers. Like, I'm getting stuff from people like Telstra and AGL and all
Yep.
these companies that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes you can't really tell because they copy all their websites, they look the same, their email templates look the same, and it's really, really hard to tell. One thing we do is we end up calling the number on their website to check if they've sent us a certain
Yep.
invoice, and they go, no, that invoice doesn't belong in our system and it's not from us. And that's how sometimes the only way we can tell that something's not quite right.
That's indeed the case. And the other scary thing is that these criminal enterprise, they start to collect data as well. So when you have the Amazon scam where somebody calls and says, oh, your Amazon account is about to, charge $50. If you react to that, they know you're likely to have an Amazon account. So as a follow-up, they may then go and send you an email, a phishing email in relation to your Amazon account because they know you have Amazon. Or you get a phone call and somebody says, oh, hey, is this Tim? And you say, no, this is Marcus. And already what they can do is they can match a phone number to agenda. They hear my voice is male and they have my first name. So subsequent approaches will be personalized to me as a man and also with my first name involved. So it essentially becomes a very, very sophisticated build up until they somehow get to you. Again, highly organized and highly profitable.
Yeah, it's like really targeted, and they're really collecting all the data about you to be able to target you specifically, or your business specifically. That's, pretty crazy for a business to have to deal with, on top of all the other problems that a business owner has, like, competitors and sales and systems and people, and all the hard stuff that businesses have to deal with. Now you've got this on top of it, which I can see is, it just makes it hard for a business unless you have the cyber protection and the know-how and the expertise around the area. Can you tell us who is responsible for these attacks? Because if it's not those faraway countries with, putting out millions of emails in the hope of, catching one or two every now and then, if it's becoming more localized and they know who you are, they know what kind of suppliers you have, who are responsible for these attacks?
There's a lot of rumor mill here because only so much leaks out of those organizations. When it comes to ransomware, the current sort of stage of knowledge is that the majority of, or some of the bigger networks come out of Russia. There's two or three, and I would really call them enterprises, and they have organizational structures and communication paths and all that. So a lot of
So it's like a
ransomware.
professional company organization now, rather than some dude in
Absolutely,
his
absolutely, yeah.
bedroom.
So a lot of the ransomware stuff happens, say, from Russia, but actually taken this a step further. So there's now such a thing as ransomware as a service. So these Russian conglomerates actually rent out their technical ability to ransom a company to people who may have access credential and then profit share. If they get in because of your information, you get half the cut and
So
they
it's like
keep
a
the other
full
half.
scale business.
It's basically a full-scale business model. Some of the more classic stuff in relation to scam emails tends to come from African states. Um, the interesting thing with the penetration of social media across business as well is that it doesn't really matter. Like most of the perpetrators will still sit offshore. So, could be state actors or could be, Russia potentially state sponsored or could just be pure criminal enterprise in Africa. They're usually still foreign bodies. But meanwhile, there's technology to make even me sound like an Aussie, right? Clearly, we're not using that here because I don't sound like one too much. But so that you can today have a video call with a brunette female Caucasian woman, but it may well be an Asian man that is having that conversation with you. Such is the technology today, where
Yeah, that's the
even live
deep fake
conversation
technology.
can be faked.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I've seen that where literally they can make you look like an actor, an
Yeah.
actress. They can make you look like anyone and put your face or someone else's face on a different body, and get the voice really, really close as well. So yeah, it's really becoming super sophisticated. It sounds like it's something that coming out of a movie or something. So how do we prevent these attacks? Like, as a small business, or medium business, whatever it is that you're running, it could be a private family business that's grown to a certain size. It's hard enough for someone to run a business and look after everything and have this on top to worry about. So what do you do if you're a really small business and it's just you, or what do you do if you've got 10 people or 50 people? Does it make a difference? How do we prevent these cyber attacks from happening?
I love that question. And the reality is you have to go and ask yourself, how are you doing your email today? So 20 years ago, as a small business or micro business, email was unobtainable because you would have to buy mail servers and build all this stuff just so you can send and receive emails with your own name on it, right? What's happened is that email services have been commoditized. So meanwhile, getting an email with your brand name on it is a 5 minute affair and costs $10 a month. The problem we have is that the IT industry has forgotten to adapt the same sort of model of scale down of enterprise to small business into cybersecurity space. The way I put this is as much as you're getting your email and your accounting and your files via the cloud today, we can now provide enterprise grade end-to-end cybersecurity like you would see it in a bank today and like you saw it in a bank 20 years ago. We can now deliver that via the cloud as well. Doesn't matter where the computers are, where the staff are. It doesn't matter which systems or which cloud systems you use. The fundamentals are that we can very easily, with lots of cloud-based mechanisms, protect the person, your staff, yourself, and the computers they use from being abused in successful cyber breaches.
Well, that's at least a plus, because if you're saying whether you're a small business or a large business, you basically have the same access to enterprise level cybersecurity. So it's full on commercial grade cybersecurity that can be delivered kind of like a cloud service on a person by person basis,
That's
which I think is a great thing, because previously, a long time ago, when I was getting computers and having little businesses that we were trying to do, the only thing we had access to was stuff like Norton antivirus and those really cheap retail virus protection that I don't even know if they worked or not, because they just looked like they were just a blanket same copy and paste cookie cutter thing. Whereas what you're saying, from what I'm hearing, is that you've got enterprise grade level of cover. Can that be customized to a particular type of business with a particular set of needs?
yes, absolutely. So the challenge, I guess, is if you have a big business, you have a budget, you have staff, you have an IT department, you have cybersecurity specialists, you have all these resources to make your systems secure and train your people and write those governance, policy frameworks and all that kind of stuff you should be doing. Now, if you're a micro business, you don't have that. So what we have done is we have basically taken that cybersecurity and IT department stuff, and we've skinned it right down to what's really required to protect your business. And as an example, there's two simple measures that protect your business to over 99.9% from any external induced ransomware attack. That can be done today for $49 a month, but IT is not doing it. And why? That's what I actually ask quite often. Why? And the only answer I can see is that they or people think it's too complicated or it's too hard. I just think, if it costs me $267,000, as opposed to less than $50 a month to protect the machine, why wouldn't I?
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, like, instead of traditionally, if a business wanted the protection, they'd have to build a whole team of experts. But now, you sit here as a group that can provide these enterprise level commercial robust solutions to a small business. So basically, you're like the team for a small business owner.
That's exactly right. And in the set, and again, I come back to everybody understands how email works. 20 years ago, you could not send an email from magneticalliance.com.au without having a bunch of IT guys and buying servers and having an office and having a big internet connection and all this stuff that costs so much money, right? Now, you don't even think about that because you have somebody who provides you email as a service. And so what we've essentially done is we've looked at how does the corporate world make sure they're not getting hacked? And we've taken that and we've built that in a way so we can deliver that to a small business like an email service via the cloud. You don't have to bother how we make sure that your computer locks itself. You don't have to bother on how we make sure that your staff member can't click a link, download a piece of ransomware that basically ruins your business within about 30 seconds flat. You don't need to know, but we do it and we can do it. And if you have specific requirements, we adjust that solution so it works exactly right for your business. And we don't leave any doors open that shouldn't be open, but we leave all the doors open that enable your staff to work productively.
So, what other typical solutions are there in the marketplace, and how much do they cost? Like, if you were to get a Norton antivirus, what kind of protection would you get? How much would it cost? Versus if you're a national bank of some sort, what kind of protection? How much will it cost? And can you give us an idea of stuff in between?
As indicated, antivirus is still a must. You can buy commercial grade solutions from $5 to $15 a month. And some of them are more sophisticated. Other ones are just sort of using the old, we know what we're looking for. More modern version look more at behavior. So antivirus is your absolute baseline. If you don't have that, you pretty much deserve to be hacked. I'm sorry to say that. And I think this is why the industry struggles a bit. There's this big area, this big blank area of individual tools. So depending on the threat, there's certain measures. For example, multi-factor authentication is something that just has to be implemented. And quite often it's also free. But again, a lot of IT companies or businesses don't do it because they think it's too hard. But for a lot of phishing attacks, multi-factor authentication is actually the easiest and the cheapest protection mechanism because the credentials don't let you in yet, right? As you go sort of up that path, the moment businesses start to have server infrastructure, big centralized infrastructure, that's usually where the security can come from, if it's properly implemented, but it's very expensive and it's usually has a high upfront cost. What we see generally in the cybersecurity space is the moment you talk to a company, they say, oh, yeah, that's fantastic. We have this brilliant computer server box thing that you need to buy for $10,000 and put in your office. And of course, in the age of COVID, the majority of businesses may not even have premises anymore, or had at least have a significant component of distributed workforce that are no longer on premises. So the whole approach of needs to have servers, needs to have components, infrastructure, needs to have centralized location is just too outdated. Again, this is like telling people today, if you want to have appropriate cybersecurity and email, you need to drive to your office every morning to email and be protected. You just can't do that anymore. You have to
Yeah, I mean
ultimately embrace.
that mode of protection is not really going to be sufficient for the way the rest of the IT world and the business world is going, which is all remote. Like everything is going online, everything is
That's
going
right.
remote. You can't have, I guess, a solution that needs you to be physically in a place. That just kind of goes against the whole trend that the world is going towards. So, how do you actually implement your cyber solutions? I know that I really like the way that you approach things when we met and when we discussed cyber. And I like the whole 360-degree approach to closing all the doors and putting in all the security and making sure that everything is locked down instead of just implementing one measure. But how do you describe, I guess, your solution versus other solutions out there? Maybe you can explain a bit better.
Yeah, sure. So, in a nutshell, what we do is we look at a business, or we look at the attack surface of a business as being the people in front of the computers and the computers themselves. And so this is what we need to essentially assist to secure. If a company has server infrastructure somewhere that is hosted or decentralized or whatever, or even if it's in the office, usually there is professional staff looking after security of those systems, and that's usually sufficient. But it's again, and it's the same with cloud services. The cloud is indeed secure, but how you access it is not. And so we focus very much on the person in front of the computer and the computer. And what we do is with about 10 to 15 minutes worth of interaction on the individual side, we implement a raft of tools, and then we provide the training and the ongoing support and the ongoing employee awareness training for staff to know how to use the tools. So, for example, password management or multi-factor authentication. Essentially, we're there, we provide the onboarding, and we, of course, provide the ongoing support. And this is probably why a company like Norton can't really compete because they just sell product. They don't want to provide service. You're lucky to even see a phone number. But the reality is, if you're dealing with people, and if cybersecurity is predominantly a people problem, which I firmly believe it is, then you have to be able to provide a service. And that's what we do as an ongoing
So
concern.
if I can summarize that, putting a cybersecurity virus protection, something like that, it's like putting a padlock or an alarm system. But you're saying there's the stuff, there's the hardware. If we compare it back to our security example, there's the house, right?
Yep.
But then you're talking that there's the people in the house that could leave doors open, windows open, gates open, and all that kind of stuff. And something that you mentioned a little bit earlier as well is that some people in the house are actually opening doors on purpose
Yep.
because they're working with the criminals and they're getting a cut of what can be stolen.
That's correct. And indeed, what we do again in these circumstances, what we essentially can provide is we can make it impossible for an employee to stuff it up. That's in a nutshell what we can provide.
So you
Um,
kind of got like your team there monitoring people and making sure that the people in the house and people around the house and then the neighborhood at large, people passing by, everyone is monitored, everyone is trained, and if there is a potential for someone to be doing stuff that's no good from inside the actual house, that you catch them before they let anyone in, and you set up all these red flags so that if anything happens, you quickly lock everything down, make sure that as fast as possible you shut everything down so that you can't have people access stuff and take stuff and all that. Is that am I getting that right, like from a layman's point of view?
yeah, that's correct. So we've got your external threats. That's if your intrusion prevention stuff, and then we have your internal threats, which we can do a lot with monitoring. We also got to be realistic. And you said that earlier. This is indeed correct. But our system, based on our research, provides 95.6% security. Antivirus alone provides about 47%. So we can drastically increase cybersecurity implementing our solution. But there is always that little risk reminder for which you require something like cyber insurance. The way I look at cyber insurance, though, is it's actually not an insurance against losing your company. No cyber insurance will pay that. Cyber insurance, all they do is they provide some degree of support in the case of a breach, but they can't prevent your business from going under because client data was exposed.
I guess like a good way that I've had actually numerous security experts tell me this, whether it's in the online cyberspace or it's in the actual physical security space, they've actually told me the same thing. If someone really wants to target you and attack you and break into your house and do something, they're going to keep going at it until they do it. But what you're actually preventing is the general run-of-the-mill crook who's scanning houses to see what's vulnerable, to see what they can get into. And it's not really a targeted attack. It's more of a opportunistic attack to see who can fall for whatever their scam is, or whoever
Yeah.
is an opportunity for them to break into. Same with physical security as well. Someone told me this who's a physical security expert. If you have a crook walking past your neighborhood, they're going to look at the house where there's no gates, they don't have an alarm system, they may have stuff in the way so people can't see if someone's trying to break in. They're going to look for certain factors before they break in. Now, if they look at that kind of house versus a house with gates, alarm systems, Dobermans, German Shepherd dogs, and very secure looking house where all the neighbors can see what's going on, neighborhood watch there. That's not a place they're likely going to enter. So it sounds the same with cyber, in that if you don't have all the protection, if you don't have all these things in place, you start becoming a target because you're easy prey for these criminals who are trying to cyber attack you. Is that more or less the case?
I would agree, Mark. It is very much so that as you, there's never 100%, but you can build solid defenses that will ultimately protect your business from being hacked, or in the unlikely event of it still occurring, being able to fully recover from it. If you don't have defenses, if you don't have the night lights and the cameras and all that kind of stuff, and the neighborhood watch, right? Then yes, it's extremely likely you will basically be walked in on and nothing will be left behind. And your business will ultimately cease to exist.
So it's not just protecting it, but minimizing the damage that's caused as well.
That's correct. And that's part of, mitigation strategies like backup and disaster recovery. In instances where some infrastructure is critical, we can set it up in a way so it can basically never fail. Obviously comes over the price tag, but the reality is that if something goes wrong, you need to be able to recover, and you need to be able to recover fast and in an efficient manner.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, is there anything else that we haven't covered you think is important to cover?
I love the way your business partners, explained this to me. He, Jack, right? For those who do know him, he said to me once, I've built this business for 10 years. And I don't really care if we're going to have problems or go under because of market fluctuation or, war or whatever could happen that I can't influence. But what I just couldn't really deal with, if some dumb old crook from somewhere overseas managed to infiltrate my company and within a few minutes basically ruins part of my life's work just because they can. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that as a business owner, that's probably how you want to look at this. I know it may not be the greatest of topics to talk about on a business lunch, but the reality is if your cybersecurity is not up to scratch today, you may simply no longer have a business tomorrow. And you ought to take it seriously because without computers, most businesses we work with, the business simply no longer functions. And with the data the business holds in some hands, in some criminal hands, you may simply no longer have a business.
Mm. Well, it's the same with anything to do with business growth or personal growth. 90% of the stuff that we have to do is not going to be sexy all the time. Like, if you want to be healthy, you're going to eat your vegetables, do your exercises, and all that kind of stuff. It's not going to be going to the championship every day. You're not going to be doing the exciting stuff. It's really all the boring stuff that you need to do that will help you grow, and not only grow but retain the growth, because to actually grow a business is actually not that hard, but to keep a business and keep it growing is the hard part. To retain what you have created is the hard part. 96 to 99% of businesses die within their first 10 years. People have grown. I've seen it. I've dealt with people who have come to me with businesses in the tens of 20, 30 million dollars, and then a couple of years later it's gone. They don't have it because they didn't protect it. They weren't able to keep what they had, and they weren't able to grow it any further. And that's the reason why I think that the cybersecurity discussion is really one of the top priorities for any business owner, is because if you don't do it, you don't even potentially have a business long term. You may not have a business that exists after a cyber attack. And you can see now, with everything going on around the world, the number of cyber attacks in 2022 has gone through the roof, and a lot of it is to do with state and countries going to war with each other. But whenever the technology exists for that to happen in the military space or in the field of where you've got countries going against each other, chances are it's going to trickle down to the criminal organizations and the people who have access to certain things. Just like if they manufacture guns for the military, it's going to trickle down to the people who are running criminal organizations. There is a black market for guns, there is a black market for technologies, and they could use that technology against people who are just trying to run a business and make a living. So although, like you said, look, it's not the sexiest lunch conversation, but I think it's one of the most important things that a business owner should be focused on if they want to keep their business.
That's right. And the threat is real. So in 2021, globally, we had a cyber breach every 11 seconds. Every 11 seconds.
Is that in Australia or globally?
That's globally. And in 2015, it was every 40 to 45 seconds. So you can see how over the short period of time, the actual breaches have multiplied. The other thing is that the attacks in the same time, just in the last 2 years, in 2019, there was a fourfold increase. And in 2020, there was a sixfold increase. Last year stats aren't in yet, but it's going to be again somewhere in the 6 to 8 folding year on year. So the attacks are going absolutely through the roof. And equally, while some businesses protect themselves more, the breaches go up through the roof as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say we are very grateful for being involved and aligned with Jam Cyber. You guys have a really good team and always there whenever we need you, and we've got the full protection, and that makes us be able to sleep at night, sleep in peace without being up worrying about getting cyber attacked. That's one less worry we have because we have the team behind us to help protect our business. So I really appreciate the time that you've spent to elaborate all this. I think it's going to be important for small business owners to understand. And how can people reach you, Markus and Jam Cyber, if they want to get in contact, if they've got questions about cybersecurity, if they've got if they don't have cybersecurity and they need a bit of a hand, or some resources that they may want to research, how do they reach you?
Easiest way is to go to our website, www.jamcyber.com. There's obviously contact options. There's also a lot of information on our website about what cybersecurity should encompass and what sort of standards, if you will, are existing in Australia. Clearly, there's a phone number on our website. You're always free to give us a call, or you can personally send me an email with any questions you have. And my email address is Markus, that's Markus @jamcyber.com. And we'd be delighted to help you out. We're very much about educating. So whether you, in the end, manage to get the right security degree with another supplier or with somebody who works internally, our main mission is to make Australian business safe. Because as a fact, we know it can be done. That's what irks me personally is I know we can secure business, but 95+% of people we talk to aren't appropriately protected. So there is a fix. It's not expensive. It's not hard. It should just be done. So whatever we can do to assist that trend, we're doing.
Thank you. And there's one more thing that I'd just like to urge people to have a look at. These guys at Jam Cyber have created a cyber health check. And the cyber health check actually can have a look to see how protected a business is, what kind of protection they have in place, what percentage you are protected. And if you have any questions about, is my business protected? Do I have adequate protection? What are my risks? I would suggest talk to Markus and have a look at that cyber health check, because it is super, super cheap and super fast to do and definitely worthwhile. Even if you don't do anything from a cyber protection point of view with Jam Cyber, I think it's worth doing that so that you know where you are, and then you can decide what to do from there, whether you want to take your own measures to protect your business or find someone else. I just think that having that knowledge is really, really critical to know where do I stand right now, how protected am I, how exposed am I, and where are the areas that I need help with. So yeah, have a look at that. That's really good value. So that's it, Marcus. Thank you very much for the interview. I
Thank
hope
you.
that you are successful in protecting lots and lots of businesses from being cyber attacked. I do know that for people who have had it done, it's just a disruptive and destructive for not just the business owner and losing everything they work for. It's also for the employees who are going to lose their livelihoods. It's also for the family that's going to have their kids and their schooling and everything disrupted when everything is turned upside down because of a cyber attack that could have been prevented by proper protection. So appreciate all your work. Thank you very much. And I might have some questions for you next time. I will deep dive into some of the topics because I'd love to understand a few more bits and pieces. We can't cover everything in one interview, but I'd love to know a little bit more about things like ransomware and phishing attacks and all that in a bit of detail so that we can let people know what they look like and give them some examples, because chances are it's probably happened to people without them knowing it.
That's right.
So thank you for your time. Appreciate it. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See you
Marcus.
soon, Mark.
No worries. Bye.